So operators typically resolve to true or false, and they're good for checking things to find out whether how two things compare. So I'm just doing 4 simple operators here. I'm saying assert or check to see whether the number 5 is equal to the number 5. And you see there are 2 equal signs. When you do a comparison operator, you have to use 2 equal signs. A single equal sign attempts to assign, like assigning a variable. So when you're doing a comparison, you need to do 2. So I'm saying, tell me that 5 is equal to 5. Well, we know that's true. So this will actually output true, a Boolean true. And then check to see whether 4 is greater than 4. We expect that to fail or give a false. Tell me whether 4 is greater than or equal to 4. That should resolve as true. And then I just want to show the type of Boolean, saying 10 is less than 5. That's going to be a false. And then tell me the type of that value, and that will return a Boolean. So when I hit run, you can see I get true, false, true, and class bool. Just note, Booleans are case sensitive, so if you're trying to assign a Boolean, they need to be a capital T or a capital F, or it won't recognize it as a Boolean. Continuing on, operators can also include logical operators and or not, so you can make much more complex checks of your data based utilizing those things. Here I've just got a simple example again. I've got number 1, the number 2, and number 3 assigned 5, 10, and 13, and I can print the output of this. So when I'm trying to do a compound check where I'm checking 2 different things, I can put the and statement in between. So I'm saying, is number 1 less than number 2, which is true, and is number 2 less than number 3, which it is. So I have true and true. When you have true and true, it's going to result in true and print it to the statement. So this whole thing collapses down to a single statement of true. The second one is saying determine, this is a shorthand for doing this same thing. So you can say number 1 is less than number 2 is less than number 3. This is essentially saying number 1 is less than number 2 and number 2 is less than number 3. So it's the same thing, it'll result in the same output. And this last item I want to note because people fall into this trap all the time. This seems like it would result in an expected way, and it does not. So if you read this, I'm saying check to see whether the word hammer is equal to either whatever or something. Now this should result in false, as you would expect, right? Because hammer does not equal whatever or something. However, if I change this to hammer, you would expect this to resolve as true. And it does. Okay? But now, if I do something and then I do hammer, it turns out to be false. So it is not working in the way you expect it to when you try to do this stuff. It feels like it should just check each one of these. But what it does when you do something like this, first the item in the parentheses gets resolved. So it's saying here something or hammer. What this does is it will output the first true statement from this grouping. So something is a thing, so it's just going to return the first one. So this whole thing returns something, and that collapses down into that, and then it's just trying to say, is hammer equal to something, which is false. So it doesn't check hammer against something and then check hammer against hammer. It checks hammer against the result of this statement. It also does not work with the parentheses removed. So if I say hammer equals something or hammer, this is going to resolve in true. It's going to result in hammer because hammer does not equal something, so it's false. And then the false or the word hammer, false is not true. Hammer is just resolves as true because it is just a string, so it is a thing. So it results in the word hammer. So the point I'm trying to get to is you need to be cautious about trying to stack some of these things in this way because you can get unexpected output and not realize you're getting it until you start really testing all the different scenarios. What I would say here, in this case, you could say hammer equals something or hammer equals hammer, and this will result in true because it is doing two comparison operators, and one of them is going to return true, so the whole statement will return true. Now if I change this to an and, it'll be back to a false. And the reason this is important is because when we get into doing if statements and loops, sometimes you try to create compound checks like this, and you can fall into traps. So it's just, I wanted to point it out and as cleanly as I can. This is something you should go and try on your own and get comfortable with. Just try to come up with a somewhat complex check and just make sure it works as you expect it to, and try it in different ways as I have here, so you get comfortable with how this kind of works, because it just doesn't work as you would expect straight standard math would work, or you know, logic operations would work. Okay. This is just one other thing. I think this might come up in an assignment or something, so I threw it at the end. You can do this variable. So I've just created a variable called testing, and I'm putting a string in that variable, and then I'm doing an operator on that checks to see whether it starts with T. And we're going to get into some of these things either this week or next week. I can't remember. But what this is saying is check the variable testing and see if it starts with the letter T. And this whole statement will just result in a true, because it is just determining that variable, yes, it does start with T, so the output is true. Okay, that's everything I have for this week. Please get an early start on that homework, so if you run into issues, you can get assistance, and reach out to me if you have any problems. Thanks.